called me at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had just set my coffee mug down on the counter, and the clock on the microwave was the first thing I looked at when the phone rang. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had a closing scheduled for 9 o'clock, a condo sale I had been managing for 3 months, and I was already thinking about the paperwork I needed to review before I drove in. The number was my daughter's. I answered on the second ring. She wasn't speaking. She was breathing, that kind of breathing that comes after a long cry, shallow and uneven, like someone who has used up everything they had and is running on the last few fumes of composure. I had heard that breathing before, when her father passed, when she lost the baby the year before her son was born. I knew what it meant. "Honey," I said, "talk to me." It took her a moment. Then she said, "Mom, she changed the locks." I set the coffee mug back down. "Tell me where you are," I said. She was in her car, parked in the driveway of the house she had lived in for 4 years, the house she and my son-in-law had rented from his mother since before my grandson was born. My grandson, who was 3 years old and was sitting in the back seat in his pajamas, holding a stuffed elephant named Button, because my daughter had grabbed him and the diaper bag and walked out to the car to get his juice cup from the cup holder, and when she went back to the front door, her key did not work. She had tried it 3 times. She had knocked. She had rung the doorbell. No one answered. Her husband's mother owned the house. That had always been the arrangement. They paid rent. Below market, yes, but they paid it every month on time, never once late. My daughter had lived there. She had planted a small herb garden along the back fence. She had painted the baby's room herself, soft yellow with white trim. She had replaced the kitchen faucet when it started dripping and paid for the plumber out of her own pocket. And now the locks were changed. At 6 in the morning, while she was in the driveway. "Is your husband home?" I asked. He was. He was inside. She had heard his voice when she knocked, muffled behind the door, and then nothing. I did not say what I was thinking. I said, "Stay in the car. Keep the doors locked. I'm on my way. I've worked in real estate law for 31 years. I started as a paralegal when my daughter was in diapers and worked my way through night school while she and her brother grew up. I have handled landlord-tenant disputes, wrongful eviction cases, property fraud, lease violations, and every gray area in between. I know what the law says, I know what it means, and I know what someone can and cannot do to another person at 6:47 in the morning without a single piece of notice. What my daughter's mother-in-law did that morning was illegal. Not morally wrong, though it was that too, but actually, formally, legally illegal. In our state, a landlord cannot change the locks on a tenant without going through the proper eviction process. It does not matter whose name is on the deed. It does not matter what family relationship is involved. My daughter was a tenant. She had paid rent. She had a right to that property that could not be erased with a locksmith and a phone call. I want to be clear about something. I am not a woman who panics. I learned a long time ago that panic is something you cannot afford when someone you love is in trouble. Panic makes you loud when you need to be quiet. It makes you reactive when you need to be strategic. My daughter needed me to think clearly that morning, so that is what I did. I pulled into the driveway 40 minutes later. My daughter was still in the car. My grandson had fallen asleep against the window, Button tucked under his chin. My daughter had stopped crying by then. She looked at me through the glass with that expression I recognized from when she was a little girl, the one that meant she had been trying very hard to hold it together and was relieved that she no longer had to. I opened her car door and I hugged her for a long moment, and then I pulled back and looked at her. "Do you have your rental agreement?" I asked. She did. She kept a copy in a folder in her car. She was always organized, even in a crisis, one of the things I admire most about her. She handed it to me. I read it in the driveway. 4 years ago. Month to month after the first year. Both their names on it. Signed. "Good," I said. "This is all I need." I walked up to the front door and I knocked. Not frantically. Not aggressively. A steady, firm knock, the kind that says I am not going anywhere. Her mother-in-law answered. She was a woman in her early 60s. Someone I had met perhaps 4 or 5 times over the years at holidays and birthday parties. We had never been close, but we had been cordial. She looked at me with an expression that was somewhere between defiant and uncertain. The uncertainty was telling. "I'd like to speak with you," I said. "This is my property," she said. "I have every right." "You changed the locks on an active tenant without court order or written notice," I said. "That's called an illegal lockout. In this state, it carries civil liability and can result in the tenant being awarded damages, sometimes double or triple rent for every day the lockout continues. I'm not telling you this to be difficult. I'm telling you because you need to understand what you've done." She stared at me. "I'm also her mother," I said. "And I'm a real estate attorney. And I need you to think very carefully about what happens next." The door did not open immediately. She closed it. I heard voices inside, her son's voice and hers. I stood on the porch and I waited. My daughter watched from the car. I did not look back at her. I kept my eyes on the door. I should explain how we got here, because none of this happened in a single morning. My daughter had been married for 6 years. Her husband, I will not describe him in ways that are unkind because he is still the father of my grandson, and because the truth is complicated enough without cruelty, had been drifting for about 2 years. Not in dramatic ways. Not in ways that made headlines. In quiet ways. He stopped being present. He prioritized things that were not his family. He made decisions without conversation and then treated the fallout as someone else's problem. My daughter had tried. I watched her try. Counseling. Twice. Long conversations I was not part of but heard about afterward. A separation that lasted 6 weeks before he came back. She had loved him genuinely and she had done the work that love sometimes requires. And at some point she had come to the conclusion that the work was only going in one direction. She told him she wanted a divorce 3 weeks before that Tuesday morning. His mother had never liked my daughter. I don't say that bitterly. It is simply true. She had a version of her son's life in her mind that my daughter had never quite fit. She had made small comments over the years. Nothing prosecutable. Nothing you could point to directly. Just a consistent low hum of disapproval. When my daughter told her husband she wanted a divorce, his mother apparently decided to accelerate the situation herself. She called a locksmith at 6 in the morning. While my daughter was in the driveway getting a cup from the car, what she did not know, what she could not have known, because we had never discussed it at those holiday dinners, was that her son had married a woman whose mother spent 3 decades making sure people understood their rights. My daughter was not just a tenant. She was a tenant with standing, with documentation, and with a mother who had seen this particular situation play out in courtrooms and settlement conferences more times than she could count. The door opened again. Her mother-in-law looked at me differently this time. The defiance was smaller. "She can come inside," she said. "She can," I said, "and I need a locksmith here within the hour to restore the original key access. I also needed, in writing, a letter, signed today, acknowledging that the lockout was a mistake and that her tenancy rights are restored pending any formal legal proceedings." "I'm not signing anything." "That's your choice," I said. "Then we go a different route. I filed the lockout complaint this morning. I contact the local housing authority, and we let the process run its course. You're looking at potential liability for the lockout itself, and given that this appears to be connected to an ongoing divorce, a family court judge is going to be very interested in the circumstances. Your call." She was quiet for a long time. "I'll call someone," she said finally. "Thank you," I said. "I'll wait." I went back to the car. My daughter looked at me. My grandson was awake now, looking up at me with those wide, dark eyes he has, the ones that have been serious since he was an infant, like he is always thinking about something just slightly too large for his age. "What's happening, Grandma?" he asked. "We're sorting some things out," I said. "Are you hungry? I have the granola bars you like in my bag." He considered this. "The ones with the chocolate chips? The very ones?" "Okay," he said. He held out his hand. "I've learned that children do not need to understand every crisis. They need to feel that the adult in the room has it handled." So I gave him his granola bar, and I sat in the back seat with him while my daughter made calls from the front seat, and I answered his questions about why Button's ear was floppy and whether elephants slept standing up, and I let the morning move forward at the pace it needed to move. The locksmith came at 9:15. New keys were made. My daughter went inside. Her husband was not in the house. He had left at some point during the standoff, which I thought was telling. His mother sat at the kitchen table and signed the letter I had drafted on my phone and printed at the office supply store 2 blocks away because I had driven past it on the way over and made a note. It was not a comfortable signing. She did not look at me. She signed where I indicated and she set the pen down and she said, "You didn't have to make this so difficult." I thought about several responses. I chose the one that was true and also the one that would not extend the conversation unnecessarily. "I didn't make it anything," I said. "I just made sure my daughter knew her rights. That's all I've ever done." My daughter found a rental apartment the following week, a 2-bedroom on the second floor of a building about 12 minutes from my house. She paid the security deposit and the first month herself. She did not ask for help. She has always been like that, willing to accept assistance when it is offered, unwilling to ask when she feels she shouldn't need to. I helped her move. I carried boxes and assembled a bookshelf that defeated both of us for about 45 minutes before we figured out that one of the pieces had been put in the bag upside down. My grandson pushed a toy truck up and down the hallway while we worked and declared that the new apartment smelled like a swimming pool, which it did not, but he seemed to mean it as a compliment. The divorce proceeded through normal channels. My daughter had her own attorney, a colleague of mine I trusted completely, and the process was uncomfortable in the way those processes always are, but it moved forward. There were arguments about custody arrangements. There were weeks that were harder than others. There were evenings when she called me late, and we talked for a long time about things that had nothing to do with lawyers or paperwork. The custody arrangement they reached gave her primary physical custody with generous visitation for her husband. My grandson sees his father regularly. That matters. Whatever happened between the adults, he loves his father, and that love deserves to be protected. Her mother-in-law did not pursue any further action regarding the lockout. She had been advised, I assume, that it was not a position she could defend. I think about that Tuesday morning sometimes. I think about what it would have looked like if I had panicked, if I had stood in that driveway and cried or shouted or made it about my feelings. My daughter needed me to be useful that morning, and I was able to be useful because I had spent decades becoming someone with something to offer. I am not telling this story because I think I did something exceptional. I am telling it because I want people to understand something that I have told clients for years. Knowing your rights is not the same as being aggressive or confrontational. It is the opposite. When you know the law, you don't have to escalate. You can speak quietly. You can wait by the door. You can sit in the back seat and answer questions about elephant ears while the situation resolves itself. My daughter is doing well. She painted her new bedroom a color called blue smoke, which looks gray in the morning and almost purple in the evening. Her herb garden is gone, left behind in the yard of a house she no longer lives in, but she bought a windowsill planter for the new kitchen, and she has started again with rosemary and basil and one small pot of mint that my grandson insists on watering himself every morning. She told me recently that the morning of the lockout was one of the most frightening experiences of her life, not because she thought the situation was unsolvable, but because she had been standing in that driveway with her son in his pajamas and a diaper bag on her shoulder, and for a moment, just a moment, she had not known what to do next. "But then you came," she said. "I didn't say anything for a moment. I just thought about the phone ringing at 6:47, the way I had set the coffee mug down, the way I had known, before she said a single word, that she needed me to be the person who had an answer. That is the thing about the people you love. They call you at the worst possible moments, and sometimes, if you are lucky, if you have worked hard enough, if you have spent enough years learning the things that matter, you actually have something to give them. My daughter knows now exactly what to do if anyone ever tries to remove her from a home she has a legal right to occupy. She knows the number to call. She knows what documentation to keep. She knows that a landlord, no matter who they are to her personally, cannot circumvent the law because it is inconvenient for them. I hope she never needs any of it, but I am glad she has it. And if you're in a situation right now where someone is making you feel like you have no options, no rights, no ground to stand on, please hear me when I say this. You almost certainly have more protection than you think. The law is not perfect, the process is not always fast. But there are rules, and the rules exist for you too. Find out what they are, write them down, keep your paperwork somewhere you can reach it, and if you ever find yourself standing in a driveway at 6 in the morning, not knowing what comes next, call someone who does. I've thought about that Tuesday morning more times than I can count. Not the legal part, the part before. The 40 minutes I drove across town knowing my daughter was sitting in a driveway with her little boy in his pajamas and a diaper bag that wasn't packed for this. That drive is where I understood something I had sensed for years but never quite put into words. The things that protected my daughter that morning were not accidents. They were the result of choices, hers and mine, made long before any of it happened. My daughter kept her rental agreement in a folder in her car. That sounds like a small thing. It isn't. That habit, the discipline of holding on to what matters, of not assuming things will be fine simply because they should be, that is what gave us something to work with when we had 45 minutes and no room for error. She had always been that way. Careful, responsible. She did not cut corners on the things that mattered, even when no one was watching. And when it counted, that integrity showed up for her. Not as luck, as consequence. The choices you make in ordinary moments are the ones that either protect you or expose you when life stops being ordinary. I have also spent 31 years learning things that most people never have reason to learn. Landlord-tenant law, wrongful eviction statutes, the precise language that makes someone stop and reconsider. I did not walk up to that door with anger. I walked up with knowledge, and knowledge, real knowledge, the kind built slowly over years of work and study in hard cases, is a different thing entirely from anger. Anger burns fast and leaves you with nothing. Understanding lasts. It gives you options when the other person is certain you have none. But here's what I think about most. My daughter could have fallen apart that morning. She had every reason to. She was scared and humiliated and holding her son on her lap in a car that suddenly felt like the only safe place left. Instead, she called me, and while she waited, she held it together. She did not beg at the door. She did not make a scene. She sat quietly and she trusted that something would move. That is not passivity. That is a particular kind of strength, the kind that does not perform itself, that does not need an audience, the kind that simply endures until the moment it can act. What happened to her mother-in-law was not mysterious. She made a choice that was wrong, legally and otherwise, and she was held accountable for it. That is not a dramatic thing. It is just how cause and effect tends to work when someone finally understands what ground they're standing on. My daughter's herb garden is gone. The little yellow room she painted for her son is in someone else's house now. Some things you leave behind and you don't get them back, but she has a windowsill planter in the new kitchen. She has a bedroom painted blue smoke. She has a little boy who waters the mint every morning like it is the most important job in the world. She built something new. That is what people with her character do. They don't wait for someone to restore what was taken. They start again, carefully, with what they have, and they make it worth something. I hope that's what you take from this. Not the legal strategy, not the specifics of tenant rights, though those matter, and you should learn them. I hope you take the quieter thing, that who you are in the small moments, how honest you are, how prepared, how willing to keep going when it is hard, is exactly who you will be when it counts the most.